Have you ever sat at a table, fork paused halfway to your mouth, and felt, before any word was spoken, that you no longer belonged? That single, silent second when the room's warmth becomes a thin veneer and your reflection in the glass looks like a costume someone else gave you. Insights drawn from Krishnamurti frame that moment not as a failure, but as a doorway. Listen to it. Lean into the silence. Something in you is calling for change. Picture a caterpillar on a leaf, safe inside a slow, ordinary life. One day it begins a work no one else can see. It dissolves the forms that held it and becomes soft, vulnerable, utterly dependent on the process. Then, mysteriously, wings appear. The transformation is exposure. The butterfly arrives only after a period of raw fragility. Now imagine a lobster beneath the surf. To grow, it must crack its shell, emerge soft and helpless, and wait, patient and raw, until a new shell hardens. Both images carry the same message. Real growth involves being briefly unarmored. When that silent knowing arrives, at a family dinner, on a morning commute, standing in front of a mirror, you face a choice that will shape months or years ahead. You can tuck the knowing away and keep the costume on, or you can let the costume fall. Both paths have costs. Both demand courage. The landscape you're now inhabiting is often a double world. On one side is the marketplace, calendars, mortgages, job titles, the small rituals that keep a household and office a life functioning. On the other side is a quieter interior dimension, a shift in values, a widening of attention, a felt incompatibility with the scripts you once obeyed. You learn to live in two registers at once, present and absent, compliant and awake. It works for a while. It is also exhausting. People around you react in three very predictable ways. Some will attempt to normalize you, pull you back toward the known. They will jokingly coax, "Come on, you're overthinking this." Or they will explain your discomfort as a phase. This attempt to explain you away is often tender. It is also a means of restoring the familiar balance. Others will simply drift. There will be a slow, almost imperceptible sliding of people out of your life. They won't make a scene. They'll become less available, less interested. The third response can be sharpest. Hostility, suspicion, sometimes open rejection. When you stop authoring the shared story, you can feel like a cautionary tale. Each of these reactions says something not about your worth, but about the limits of the world you're leaving. What should you do with this knowledge? Stay silent and keep your life intact, or speak and risk the bridges collapsing? The temptation to hide is strong. Living a double life, making payments, showing up, nodding along while holding a secret inner allegiance, feels at first like prudence. There's safety in it. Obligations are met, relationships preserved, reputations intact. But time reveals the cost. Fragmentation accumulates. You turn into a person who can recite two biographies, the official one and the quieter, truer biography that lives like an ache under the ribs. That split wears you down. It steals energy, clarity, and the possibility of fully intimate relationships, because intimacy requires authenticity. Revealing yourself prematurely, however, is not the heroic alternative many imagine. Announcing your transformation with zeal can burn what still needs to be honored. Not everyone in your orbit is at the same place. Abrupt departures can leave loved ones confused, hurt, or even betrayed. Responsibilities, children, elders, professional obligations do not evaporate because you've changed. A hasty exit can create harm that lasts. There is no single moral verdict here. Each situation demands care. The aim is not dramatic rupture, but fidelity. Fidelity to your growing truth and fidelity to the commitments you have made. Another danger stalks new awakenings, the spiritual ego. You might notice a quiet sense of superiority, a new currency of insight that separates you from those who haven't had your experience. It can be seductive to watch others remain in the matrix and feel special for having awakened. That is not maturity. It is another form of myth-making. Authentic transformation shows up as softness, not condescension. True insight increases your capacity for tenderness, not your appetite for distance. So what lies between the two poles of hiding and burning bridges? I want to invite you toward a middle path, a set of practical practices that honor both the demands of life and the imperative of inner truth. This is not a recipe. Think of these as experiments, small, steady labors of attention. First, cultivate honest micro-conversations. You don't need to stage a grand revelation. Begin with short, truthful sentences. "I've been feeling unsettled lately," or "something shifted in me, I'm still figuring it out." These line up your interior and exterior in small, sustainable ways. Honesty in increments is less dramatic and more durable than sudden confession. Second, set boundaries without drama. Boundaries are not weapons. They are maps for responsible living. They might look like limiting certain conversations when you're depleted, declining leadership roles that require you to be someone you no longer are, or saying no to events that feel performative. Boundaries help preserve your presence for the work that truly matters, and they protect those around you from unprocessed volatility. Third, maintain responsibilities. There is moral and practical integrity in staying for what you promised. Continue to take care of dependents, fulfill contractual obligations, and tend to immediate duties while you simultaneously recalibrate your life. This is not mere stubbornness. It is a recognition that growth happens in the real world with real consequences. Fourth, find one sympathetic listener. A single person who can hold your process without trying to fix it, a friend, a mentor, a therapist, a seasoned practitioner, makes enormous difference. You don't need an audience, you need a witness. Witnessing softens isolation. It keeps you anchored in reality while your inner contours shift. Fifth, do small actions that align with your new values. Volunteer once a month. Read a new author. Attend a retreat. These are not guarantees of instant belonging. They are invitations, tiny experiments that increase the probability of encountering people whose inner lives resonate with yours. Remember, patience is not passivity. The lobster and the caterpillar do not rush their remaking. The period of vulnerability is not punishment. It is the structural requirement for new capacity. You will feel naked sometimes. That nakedness is the margin where you learn new forms of care. There will be days when loneliness presses like a physical weight. The dark night, as mystics have called it, is often misunderstood as failure. It is actually a passage. Think of the hero who leaves the village. She must face empty valleys and uncertain maps, not because she has been abandoned, but because the journey requires a shedding of prior identity. This in-between is an educator. It strips away what was merely habitual and reveals what is essential. While traversing that dark night, compassion becomes your primary ethic. Not compassion as pity, but compassion as steady attention to both your own pain and the bewilderment of those around you. You may become tempted to see others as obstacles to your awakening. Resist that. Most people are doing the best they can with the maps they possess. Compassion does not mean tolerating abuse or dishonesty. It means refusing to weaponize your clarity against those still navigating adolescence of the heart. There is also a practical prescription against one of the most insidious pitfalls, performative transformation. If your inner shift becomes a brand or a personality, it stops being a practice and becomes another costume. Monitor your motives. When you feel proud of how far you've come, pause. Ask, is this pride protective? Is it shielding me from vulnerability? Genuine practice increases humility, not social capital. Let me map out how others typically react in technical language, just so you can anticipate and not personalize it. The first reaction, normalize, pull back, is usually offered with warmth. Family members make jokes, friends become overly solicitous, partners may try to fix everything. The second reaction, distance, drift, takes the form of slow unavailability, canceled invitations, the thinning of texts. The third reaction, hostility, can look like ridicule, accusations of betrayal, or cutting ties. None of these are inherently about you. They are about the pressure your change exerts on a shared story. Now about community. New companions do appear. They rarely arrive as a dramatic cavalry. They show up as books that land on your lap, as teachers whose presence reframes something ordinary, as a stranger in a coffee shop whose single sentence shifts your orientation. Often the first community that feels right is a group of seekers who are modest, unglamorous, and stubbornly kind. Study groups, practice circles, small retreats. Expect synchronicity, but not in the form of immediate rescue. Expect subtle convergences that, over time, solidify into belonging. Your presence matters in the formation of those communities. You cannot and should not try to convert. Influence works differently. It begins by being steady, transparent, and useful. When you appear in a group as someone who is learning rather than someone who has arrived, you invite others to take off their costumes. Presence that invites rather than persuades is the most fertile kind. There will be losses. Friends will fade. Some roles will close. Some institutions will distance you. These losses are real and mournable. Allow yourself the grief. There's a hard generosity in letting sorrow move through you instead of insisting on immediate positive spin. Naming the loss, without inflating it into permanent catastrophe, creates a container for grief and opens space for what's next. And then comes the shift we all hope for, the slow rearrangement that reframes what was lost as a liberation. What falls away are not only relationships, but the illusions that kept you performing. You wake to find less noise in your thinking and more clarity in your choices. The mask that protected you from shame is no longer needed because you have learned how to inhabit vulnerability without being consumed by it. You begin to recognize people who are not merely attendants to your life story, but participants in mutual exploration. This is the ethical spine of change, fidelity to inner truth paired with practical care for the world you already inhabit. It is not an either-or, but a both-and. You must safeguard your integrity without using integrity as a weapon. You must learn when to let go and when to hold fast. If you are listening now and feeling the tide shifting under your feet, I want to offer a simple practice to begin tomorrow. Each morning for 1 week, spend 5 minutes writing a single sentence that begins, "Today I will be truthful about." It can be small, my energy, my need for rest, my confusion about work, and that is the point. Truth in small measures tends to be the most sustainable truth. After a week, notice how your relationships respond. You may not see dramatic change immediately, but you will begin to map your interior against your actions. Small truth cultivates capacity. A second practical step, identify one responsible adjustment you can make that honors both your obligations and your awakening. Maybe you renegotiate a deadline rather than quitting outright. Maybe you rearrange a work schedule to allow time for study without abandoning financial responsibilities. These small recalibrations build a bridge between your inner life and external duties. And remember to watch for the seductive ways the ego dresses as awakening. If you find yourself feeling morally superior, take a breath and ask a humble question. What am I avoiding by being proud? Pride often masks loneliness or fear. Naming it dissolves its power. Toward the end of this passage, it helps to reframe losses as clarifications. The people and places you leave behind were not always wrong. They were simply not aligned with what you are becoming. The freedom that follows is not a license to abandon. It is the permission to stop pretending. Freedom looks less like a dramatic ransom and more like an uncluttered room. There is room to breathe, to notice, and to be present in ways you were not before. There is also a quieter gift. As your edges soften, your capacity to be with others deepens. You will find that honest presence attracts a different set of relationships. Not a larger crowd necessarily, but a truer one. Those relationships are less about shared opinions and more about shared capacity. The capacity to listen, to be present, to be corrected, to be forgiven. Before we close, a small practical invitation. Pause the video now and type one short sentence in the comments. Describe the moment you first realized you no longer belonged. Keep it to one sentence. This small act is not performance, it is witness. If you're not ready to share publicly, simply write it down for yourself. Either way, the discipline of naming moves you from anonymous suffering into tangible possibility. Pause 5 seconds. As you move forward, keep the images of the caterpillar and the lobster as companions. Growth will require a period of soft exposure. That exposure is not a sign of failure. It is the architectural condition of new capacity. Practice tenderness with yourself. Practice small truth with those you love. Maintain obligations wherever possible and negotiate the rest with integrity. Seek witnesses. Join practices that cultivate steadiness, not spectacle. Above all, keep company with the quiet observation that first made itself known at the table or in the mirror. That silence is your ally. It is the still point that knows more than your habits. Attend to it with curiosity, not mania. These reflections draw on insights from Krishnamurti, not as doctrine or prescription, but as a sensitizing frame that reminds us. Revolution without attention becomes another form of routine. The point is not to break everything, but to learn to live the truth you have glimpsed with compassion for those who did not yet see it. If this conversation landed for you, there are gentle next steps. Consider exploring a short playlist of talks and readings that unpack these themes more practically. On patient boundary work, on holding responsibility during transition, and on cultivating small community. There's a curated list linked in the description that gathers accessible resources grounded in psychological clarity and non-dogmatic inquiry. If you found this helpful, subscribe for more reflections like this and share the video with someone who might be in the middle of their own in-between. You do not have to accelerate what is happening inside you. You do not have to punish yourself for loving people who cannot follow you where you are going. The courage you need is ordinary, to be honest a little more often, to choose presence over performance, to wait without despair. In the quiet that follows the moment you realize you no longer belong, there is a kind of openness. Step into it slowly, with care. The next chapter will not arrive as a rescue, but as a long, steady reweaving of life. Thinner at first, then stronger, and finally more true.